This 10-year-old boy's only ability was to talk to animals and plants, and leveling up wasn't possible. His life changed when he made a contract with the legendary puppy. He leveled up rapidly from 1 to 250 in a single moment, and every time his contracted spirits defeated powerful monsters, his level increased as well. He can defeat a dragon that could destroy an entire nation in a single punch. While maybe he is so powerful despite his age, his puppy was beyond your imagination, because it can annihilate an army of that same dragon in a swift motion using its claw. Before I spoiled the fun, let's start the story. In a vast hall that resembled a grand cathedral, people had gathered for a significant occasion. At the age of 10, children receive a divine revelation from the gods and are granted a job suited to their aptitude. That is the law of the world. The priest standing before them all called out the name of a young boy, Alto Glory. He was the third son of the prestigious Glory family, a house that had earned many victories during the Great Demon Lord War. With a sweet and kind demeanor, Alto radiated a positive aura. His twin brothers were known as the Sword King and the Spear King, while his sister had already become a sage. As the crowd grew excited in anticipation, the priest finally announced Alto's job: a shepherd. Everyone was shocked, including Alto himself. His mother rushed toward him in panic and worry, insisting that the priest must have made some mistake. However, the priest bowed apologetically and stated that he had consulted with the gods several times, and they had confirmed it was correct. The Glory family looked at him with pity. Being a shepherd was a job with virtually no combat abilities. Even though the Demon Lord had already been defeated, the world was still filled with dangerous monsters. Without the ability to fight, he couldn't even level up. As his mother hugged him in despair, Alto opened his system window. His stats were all at the lowest level, and his only skill was animal and plant communication. But despite all of this, Alto actually didn't mind. He liked the idea of being a shepherd. At the very least, he would be less likely to starve. Still, he knew he probably shouldn't look too happy. Not when his entire family was drowning in despair. Meanwhile, his father approached him and gently patted his head. When Alto looked into his father's eyes, he could see the deep sadness there, a sorrow born from the fact that his son's divine job had turned out to be a mere shepherd. A job with no combat power in a world crawling with monsters was likely to be considered a useless role. Alto encouraged himself, thinking that more than combat ability, he just didn't want to starve. He had faint memories of a past life, where he fought as an ordinary soldier simply because he had nothing to eat. In the end, he died of starvation. He couldn't fully remember everything about that life, but the terror of hunger was something he would never forget. Even as a noble's third son, who knew how long that comfort would last, at least as a shepherd, he could still feed himself better than some half-baked warrior. Still, he felt sorry for his family, who had such high hopes for him. Alto then saw his grandfather, Eddie, who told him to come along. Eddie brought Alto to a wide, quiet land. There were no people around, only open soil stretching far into the distance. In the far-off horizon, Alto spotted a huge castle. He asked his grandfather what that castle was. Eddie told him that it used to be the Demon Lord's castle. When Alto heard that, he said he remembered the Demon Lord his family had helped defeat years ago. Eddie nodded and said he was right. The Demon Lord was gone, but the land had since become feared and cursed, and because it was far from the royal capital, no one paid attention to it anymore. As a result, the land was given to Eddie as a reward after the Demon Lord War. It was full of rubble and completely untouched. Then Eddie looked at Alto seriously and told him he was free to cultivate the land however he liked. Eddie told him that day the god gave him a job as a shepherd, which he received. Alto agrees with him and said that it is called animal and plant communication, which seems like he can talk to other animals and even edible plants. Then his grandpa told him that it is not just about talking to edible plants, but also to human food. In other words, his skill isn't just for dairy or livestock. It can be used for agriculture too. He then handed the hoe to Alto and ordered him to try swinging the hoe. Alto collapsed onto the ground after trying to dig, completely exhausted. As he lay there, Eddie watched him and asked if he still thought clearing land was easy. Alto, panting heavily, replied with a tired no. Eddie then said that even with a skill, nothing comes easy, but that's the same for every job. Alto sat up at his grandfather's words and looked down at the soil. Eddie told him that what he had just experienced was his current limit. From this point on, he would cultivate the vast land and grow as a shepherd. While Alto was deep in thought, Eddie continued speaking. He said there was no reason to be discouraged just because he didn't have a combat job. He shouldn't feel inferior. He simply needed to utilize his strengths and do what he could because he had his own unique way of fighting. Alto was awakened by his grandfather's words. He knelt down and declared that he would do his best. As he resumed digging the soil, he told himself that even if he didn't have a combat job, he would grow stronger and give his all in his way. He then ran off and told his grandfather he wanted to see just how wide the entire land was. As he walked around and examined the rocks across the area, he realized that he would need real strength to break them. When he touched one of the stones, blisters began to form on his hands. Suddenly, a voice echoed in his ears. At first he thought it was just his imagination, but the voice was calling for help. Alto quickly realized it wasn't in his head. The sound was coming from beneath the heavy stones. When he looked closely, he found a weak and helpless puppy trapped underneath. He felt sorry for the poor creature, abandoned in such a place, and with all his strength, he lifted the rocks and pulled the puppy out. As he held the puppy in his arms, it spoke and said it was hungry. Alto realized that the voice he had heard earlier had come from the puppy. It was the effect of his animal and plant communication skill. He gently set the puppy down and gave it a piece of bread. The puppy quickly bit into it it and Alto was happy to see it eating so eagerly. He also gave it some milk. It was their family's homemade bread, known even in town, so he was glad the puppy liked it. The puppy looked at him and asked him if he understands what she was saying. Alto says yes, and told that it was his skill, and it's kinda surreal talking with a dog like that. As he saw the puppy shivers, he asked her if she has any place to go, but the puppy looked at the place and said that it seems like she don't belong there anymore. Seeing despair in its eyes, Alto then decides to take the puppy, so he asks if she want to come with him. He then gave his hand out to the puppy and said that he can't just leave a starving puppy out there. However, the puppy noticed the blisters on Alto's hand and asked about them. Alto quickly smirked and said that he scratched it when he moved the rubble earlier. He then softly apologized for the mess, but the puppy smiled at him and told him that it was all right and she understood. As Alto carries the puppy and hugs it, the puppy then tells him to be gentle, because she is a lady. Alto then apologized with a smile and introduced his name. The puppy then said, "She is Shia. Diaz Shia. She is a commander of 30 legions, but it's fine to call her Shia." Alto finds it a grand name. Shia then pleases him to stick together for a long time in the name of the blood pact. She'll be by his side forever. Alto then said that he's counting on her. While Alto slept soundly, hugging Shia the puppy in his bed, his grandfather stood just outside his room, a look of concern on his face. Alto's mom told him that Alto had brought home a puppy, and it seemed like he rescued it using his shepherd skill. Eddie remarked that even with such a difficult job, Alto remained kind-hearted, and that made him proud. But there was something about the dog that had been bothering him. He mentioned that the puppy bore a strong resemblance to Marcosius. Alto's mother then asked if that was the creature they once said fought against the demon lord during the war. Eddie nodded and confirmed it. Marcosius was a legendary beast, one that belonged to neither humans nor demons, feared by both sides. Eddie, while looking at his young, innocent grandson, thought maybe it was just his imagination. While Alto and Shia are asleep, Shia's contract on the system suddenly changed. It is a confirmed contract as a shepherd, registering her as a shepherded dog, and as a result, the contractor's level, which is Alto, will include the combined levels of the contractor and their commanded legions. His level rapidly changed from 1 to level 250 and achieved the strength of B rank and intelligence equal to D rank. All of that happened while he was sleeping. As soon as Alto woke up, he felt his body lighter and began to consume a lot of food. He even started reading many books, as his mind was flooded with knowledge. His ability also improved. As their maid saw his improvement, she felt excitement and told his master that she must inform the lady of the house, so she ran to Alto's mother. Although Alto himself could hardly believe it, something felt different. It went beyond just getting the hang of things. Meanwhile, Shia, lying on the bed beside him, asked if it might be because his stats had increased. She explained that stats are generally affected by level changes, and depending on the condition of the body and mind, the changes could be dramatic. In other words, at level 1, he would naturally be weak, but at level 10, he could already lift objects heavier than himself. Alto simply smiled and reminded her that he was just a shepherd, and still only level 1. But Shia gave him a look and said maybe he wasn't level 1 anymore. Alto sat beside her and insisted there was no way. He had only received his job yesterday, and according to the book, shepherds were lucky to gain even a single level in a year. Shia then told him to check his status screen. When Alto opened his status screen, he was shocked to discover he had already reached level 250. He scanned through the details and saw a section marked Contractor. He turned to Shia and asked if that was referring to her. Shia nodded gently, reminding him that he had given his blood and exchanged names with her. That was the sign of a full-fledged contract. With teary eyes, she asked if he regretted it, but Alto replied firmly that he had no regrets. Hearing that reassured Shia. Curious, Alto asked her what the combined level meant. Shia replied that it referred to the total level of her army, around 250. Personally, she still considered herself to be level 1. Alto then noticed a symbol marked on the magic section of the screen and asked if that was a slot to learn magic. He pointed out that, according to the book, even at level 50, shepherds didn't gain access to magic or combat skills. Shia told him that shepherds could indeed summon magic. When Alto seemed confused, she explained that shepherds excel at calling things, so he could summon fire, water, or anything he needed. No shepherd had ever reached level 250 before, so there was no information available on what might happen. As her words began to make sense, Shia looked like she had made up her mind. She got off the bed and approached Alto, handing him a ring engraved with a symbol. Alto asked what it was for. Shia explained that it was something that would make magic easier to cast. Shia began teaching him how to cast. Alto stretched out his hand and said, "Come forth, army of the water spirits." Suddenly, a glowing circular pattern formed beneath his feet, and tiny creatures made of water began to swirl and dance around them. Shia was overjoyed. For the first time, Alto had summoned quite a number of water spirits. As Alto lay down on them, smiling and amazed, their maid walked in and froze in disbelief at the sight of the spirits. Standing beside her was Alto's mother, who also looked confused and speechless. Back in the vast land, together with the water spirits, Alto was planting in the fields. As Alto's seedlings slowly began to grow into what looked like a real garden, Shia suddenly arrived, dragging a giant snake behind her. She said she found it lurking nearby and hunted it down for Alto. Alto, stunned, muttered that Shia really isn't just a regular dog. Shia then replied that she was actually a terrifyingly strong magical beast. She had nearly died in a great war and was forcibly reincarnated. This was just what she looked like now. Alto couldn't help but ponder her words about reincarnation. He himself had memories of a past life. Maybe it was possible. He gently patted Shia's head and smiled, but suddenly, Shia warned him that something was approaching. A terrifying dragon swooped down from the sky, demanding to know what was going on. Alto stood frozen in place at the sight of the beast. The dragon continued, saying he descended because he sensed a strange magical presence, only to find a mere human and a dog. He mocked them, saying they were weaklings not even worth absorbing, and that they made him land in such an unstable place, which was truly disappointing. Meanwhile, Alto and Shia were both stunned by his arrogance, as if he weren't the one who showed up uninvited and started ranting. In his frustration, the dragon lashed out with his massive tail. Luckily, Shia saved him. While the dragon laughed at them, Alto stood up and, voice shaking with rage, asked the dragon if he even realized what he had stepped on. The dragon only mocked him further, saying that humans always planted annoying things, and crushing them was at least amusing. Furious and insulted, Alto would have understood if the dragon was starving and wanted to eat them or the crops, but it just trampled on their hard work, just for fun. The dragon laughed louder, asking what Alto was going to do about it, as if he were pretending to be powerful. But Alto, filled with fury and determination, said he knew he was up against a dragon. Even so, he couldn't forgive him. He remembered the spell Shia had taught him earlier, a summoning spell for a storm. She had said it could help till the field, and also slay monsters. It was an extremely powerful summoning spell, far stronger than the slime magic. But now, with his improved stats, he could handle it. The dragon growled and warned them to run before he crushed them both. But Alto closed his eyes, felt his growing strength, and stretched out his hand. As the dragon roared in fury, Shia reassured him he was strong enough now. Then, Alto began summoning the commander of the East Wind, Euros. The dragon stopped and stared in disbelief as magic surged around them. From a glowing sigil, a beautiful and enchanting woman appeared. She floated to Alto's side and declared, "Euros has arrived." The dragon couldn't believe what he was seeing. Alto turned to the wind spirit and asked her to lend him her power with her blessing. A massive roaring tornado formed, and when the kid had already taken control of it, he jumped into the air and erased the ugliness of the dragon using the Tempest Hammer. Despite the dragon's size, he couldn't withstand the force of Alto's blow. Screaming in pain, the beast reeled from the attack. As the dragon roared in pain from Alto's powerful punch, Shia and Euros cheered in joy. Alto had done it. The dragon finally crashed to the ground from the sky and died. Euros looked on with a mysterious smile and said that it seemed her work was done. A swirling wind began to surround her as she prepared to say goodbye. She approached Alto, gently touched his face and said, his master's old body was more similar to hers, so it was easier to work with, but he's not bad either. Then Euros winked at Alto and blew him a flying kiss as a farewell. Alto, now floating in the air, suddenly collapsed, but the water spirits caught him just in time. Shia explained that it was magical fatigue. The summoning had used his own magical energy. After all, he still needed more training, she supposed. Then Alto remembered what Euros had told him about Shia's old body. He asked if it was really human-like. Shia, slightly embarrassed, admitted that she could actually transform into a human. Delighted, Alto said he wanted to see it. Shia, still shy, finally transformed into her human form. Her ears remained like those of a puppy, but her hair was thick and beautiful. Her eyes sparkled like stars, full of unspoken emotions. She was genuinely breathtaking. Alto was overjoyed to see her, thinking Shia was charming. Shia couldn't hide her smile upon hearing his words. She even told him to wait a little longer. One day, she'd be like Euros too. Alto didn't fully understand what she meant, but he nodded in agreement. Then, without warning, Shia picked him up onto her back. Alto was startled by the sudden move, but Shia said she still had plenty of energy so that she would carry him home. Shia moved quickly, and soon, Alto fell asleep on her back, exhausted from the battle. Shia smiled to herself, remembering how Alto had once given her bread and milk to survive. She quietly reassured him that even without a blood pact, she would always stay by his side. As Alto stirred slightly, Shia told him there was nothing to worry about. They were almost home. Alto thanked her for carrying him, and said that once they got home, they'd eat plenty of food. But before dinner, he had a favor to ask. At a long and spacious dinner table, a feast was laid out for Alto's entire family. His mother was delighted to see a perfectly sliced piece of meat that looked delicious and expertly prepared. Even Jin commented that he definitely had to compliment the chef for it. But despite the abundance of food, they noticed Alto quietly eating from his plate, with only vegetables on it. Curious and concerned, Jin wondered what kind of vegetables he was eating, or if it was part of some special diet. His grandfather, Eddie, explained that Alto had apparently gathered those vegetables himself, as part of his training. Hearing this, his parents were impressed, thinking he was really hardworking, and that maybe they had something to learn from him. Meanwhile, beneath the table, Shia was also watching Alto with concern. Not long before dinner, Alto had insisted that the chef prepare those vegetables for him. The chef had warned him that while the vegetables had a pleasant aroma, they were battered, not even ripe, and no matter how they were cooked, they'd end up tough, tasteless, and completely inedible. If he were strong enough to keep the dragons away, those crops might not have ended up ruined. Shia gently called his name. Alto looked up and told her that he would get stronger. Moved by his determination, Shia reached for some of the vegetables from his plate and took a bite. Smiling, she said she actually found them delicious. While Shia was resting and enjoying the fresh night air on the rooftop outside Alto's room, she overheard a conversation coming from a nearby room, a discussion between the Glory family about the discovery of a dragon's corpse. According to Eddie, he had just received the news that evening. The body was found at the ruins of the Demon King's castle. As they all knew, dragons were terrifying magical beasts. Their flames could burn everything, and only true heroes could ever hope even to scratch one. Jin and Alto's mom immediately grew concerned, not only because they weren't the ones who defeated the dragon, but more importantly, because the ruins of the Demon King's castle were where Alto worked. They quickly agreed to increase security starting the next day, and to begin a thorough investigation. Meanwhile, back at the Demon King's castle, a group of enormous fearsome dragons was hunting through the area. They were investigating the place where one of their own had been slain. Their lord, a powerful dragon, was with them. His subordinates told him there was no need for revenge. The one who died was young and inexperienced and would have fallen eventually. But the Dragon Lord disagreed. If they didn't defeat the one responsible, that being would only grow stronger. Perhaps this had all been a trap. Bait. At that moment, Shia appeared, perched atop a stone. Calmly, she remarked that dragons were just as prideful and self-centered as ever, that one should fly quietly at midnight, or risk losing any goodwill left. One of the dragons bristled with anger upon hearing such words from what looked like a mere dog pretending to be strong. Just as the Dragon Lord began to move to attack her, one of his companions stopped him. They sensed something from Shia, a magical scent. They asked if she was Markoshia's, the rumored reincarnated being, to think she was in the Demon King's castle. Or rather, as Shia corrected them, the former Demon King's castle. She told them that the land now belonged to her and Alto. Through Shia's calm but commanding tone, the Dragon Lord began to understand what she meant. He decided to withdraw and leave the territory, stating that anyone who wished to challenge them could do so, but warned that it was still too early to attempt such a thing here. As the Dragon Lord flew away, some of the others remained. When Shia asked if they still refused to back down, they sneered. They were dragons. What did they have to fear from a dog? Even their lord hesitated against such a low-level reincarnate. To them, she was pathetic. But with a pitiful expression, Shia admitted that she might indeed be low-level now, but warned them not to lower their guard. The dragons only laughed louder and mocked her. Suddenly, one of them launched a vicious attack. He slammed Shia into the ground, holding her by the throat with his sharp claws, declaring that she should die and become their nourishment. The others cackled as they watched, but Shia, choking but calm, asked him, had he ever starved for 50 years? Had he ever run out of magic, unable to summon his army? Had he ever experienced endless hunger and isolation, kept alive only by the curse of reincarnation, until one day someone rescued him? He wouldn't understand. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. As the night deepened, something inside Shia awakened. The true power of Markoshias, the guardian of the land cultivated by Alto. Her form changed. From a helpless little pup, she transformed into a towering, terrifying fox-like beast. Her eyes burned with power as she declared, "You entered without permission. Now you'll learn what happens." Some of the dragons were gripped by fear at the sight of her transformation, but one shouted not to be afraid, that she was still just a dog and no match for them. Shia looked at him coldly. Can dragons still talk after their heads fly off? In an instant, she struck. Her claws flashed, severing their heads one by one. Later, Shia quietly returned to Alto's room as if nothing had happened. She had used up all her stored energy. That form only lasted 10 minutes. As she sat by the window, Alto stirred awake. He asked if something was wrong or if she was hungry. Shia simply gave him a sweet smile and curled up beside him, resting. Far away, at the ruins of the Demon King's castle, the corpses of fallen dragons lay cold and lifeless on the ground. In the once quiet Glory family castle, a sudden commotion broke out as one of the maids, Familles, rushed in calling for Alto. The moment she saw him, she ran straight into his arms and hugged him tightly. She felt an instant jolt of energy from his body, and Alto, surprised, asked what was so urgent. Breathlessly, Familles blurted out the news that morning. A group of dragon corpses had been discovered at the ruins of the Demon King's castle. Alto froze in shock. That was the land he cultivated, now littered with the bodies of slain dragons. Soon, word spread, and people from all over town gathered at the ruins. They saw the massive dragons lying lifeless on the ground. Eddie, Alto's grandfather, couldn't believe it. Who could have possibly taken down so many dragons? Jin agreed that it wasn't something an ordinary person could do. People were already talking. As expected, dragon remains made top-tier materials, and with that many, they could seriously improve the territory's infrastructure. Meanwhile, Alto sat at his side table, still stunned. He had only fought and defeated one dragon himself. Who could have done the rest? Familles, standing in front of him, mentioned that a powerful adventurer had recently appeared in the Clover estate, perhaps the same dragon slayer. Lord Jin had also suggested they try scouting this person. As Alto's mind wandered, Familles added that anything soaked in dragon blood could massively enhance crop growth. Excited, she ran off to help Lord Eddie and the others at the ruins. Just as Alto was thinking about the dragon blood and its effect on his crops, he was interrupted by movement on his bed. It was Shia, slowly waking up. When Alto asked if she was all right, she said she felt a little dizzy, and if he gave her a few head pats, she might feel well enough to talk. So Alto moved his chair beside the bed and gently petted her. Then he asked if she had done something yesterday. Shia casually admitted she had. Alto had suspected as much. His level had suddenly jumped by 40 overnight. He smiled and told her to tell him all about it later, so he could give her the praise she deserved. Shia eagerly agreed. Later in the garden Alto had cultivated, rows of vibrant, oversized vegetables grew beautifully. Shia was thrilled. Their crops were thriving and looked delicious. Alto, full of energy, called upon the power of Euros. With a mighty tornado swirl, his vegetables were harvested in an instant. Everyone rejoiced at the fruits of their labor. Even the water spirits couldn't contain their joy. As Alto lay back among the water spirits, he asked Shia if he could summon one more more spirit. Shia reminded him he was already sustaining 3, but Alto insisted he could handle it. He wanted to harvest even more. With the ring on his finger, Alto summoned a new spirit, the nourishment commander of the Earth Brigade, Arachnia Dipsis. The stones formed into the shape of a person, and soon, a sleepy spider woman appeared, rubbing her eyes. She muttered that it had been a long time since she had been last summoned. Shia commented that she was still as sleepy as ever. Adipsis remarked that humans weren't really her specialty. She asked who the current master was. Alto smiled brightly and introduced himself. There was a slight distance awkwardness between them, and Adipsis offered to shift into a more spider-like form if that made him more comfortable. But Alto, eyes sparkling, told her she was incredible just the way she was, though he'd love to see her digging potatoes in her spider form. Blushing, Adipsis agreed. After being praised like that, she admitted, it didn't feel half bad. Shia teased her, saying she looked flustered and shy. Alto and Adipsis began digging up potatoes together. Once they were done, Euros helped prepare a meal, and they all shared the harvest. After a short rest, Alto wanted to return to work, but Shia stopped him. She reminded him that he was out of magic. Euros, Adipsis, even the slimes would soon vanish. He could barely stand. He had already reached his limit, but Alto refused to stop. He dropped to the ground, hands in the soil, saying that his treasures weren't in the clouds or across the sea. They were here, buried beneath his feet. Exhausted, he kept digging with his bare hands. Finally, he pulled out a huge, beautiful potato and showed it to Shia with a triumphant smile. Shia praised his dedication, but before she could say more, Alto suddenly collapsed. When Alto woke up, the first thing he asked was where he was. A woman who had been caring for and watching over him was glad that he was fine. Jin explained that Alto had been late coming back, so he went to check on him, only to find him collapsed from exhaustion. It was Shia who had carried him there. Alto immediately reached out and gently patted Shia's head, thanking her. Jin was impressed that Alto harvested this much in a single day. It was an impressive load. Meanwhile, his grandfather, Eddie, called out to him and told him he had really grown. Alto smiled and nodded in agreement. As Eddie reminded him not to overdo things, Alto pulled Shia into a warm hug. Eddie thinks of a new challenge and plans to summon a man for help. As Alto walked through the halls looking for his grandfather's room, he happened to run into Eddie on the way. Eddie told him that he had summoned an old friend, a top-tier merchant, to help him trade the crops from yesterday's harvest. Alto was thrilled to hear the news and happily entered the room, unaware that Eddie might have something else in mind for his grandson. Inside, a well-dressed man was waiting. He introduced himself as Miguel, a merchant. Alto then shook hands with him, and Miguel added that he was summoned there to trade with him. He specializes in crop law and selling harvests. Alto thought Miguel was a good person, but when he took his seat, his aura suddenly began to change. He told Alto that he was not ready to trade with him just yet, leaving them both to stare at each other. Miguel seriously told him that he had no intention of making a deal with him yet, and for 2 reasons. First, he wasn't sure if the crops grown on the ruins of the Demon King's castle were even edible. Second, Alto was just a 10-year-old boy and didn't seem reliable. He added that if Alto could prove himself to be a suitable trade partner, there might be things worth discussing in the future, but for now, that was still a secret. Alto was left stunned by his words, and thinking that they couldn't make a deal like this, he quickly stood up and told Miguel that it simply meant he would have to prove himself through results, because that was the only way. Meanwhile, Grandpa Eddie, who had been listening near the door, was startled when Alto suddenly came out. At the same time, Famils was walking toward them. Alto called out to both of them, and said he had something to ask. The two could only smile awkwardly as Miguel remained seated inside the room. Later, outside the Glory family's palace, Miguel and Eddie were walking together. Miguel asked where Eddie was taking him, but Eddie assured him they were almost there. Miguel grumbled that it was Ruff, a former hero, unable to beat his own grandson, ended up being his tour guide. Eddie only laughed. Eddie said that he might actually be having the most fun he'd ever had in his life at that moment. Miguel sarcastically replied that he wasn't having fun at all. He had been told it was just a trade meeting, but who in the world would buy crops grown by a kid on the Demon King's ruins? Eddie laughed again. Soon after, Miguel saw Alto with Famil inside the castle. Then Eddie told him they had arrived. It was a barn, but once inside, Miguel was shocked by what he saw. The barn was packed with box after box of beautiful vegetables. When he examined them closely, the color, the luster, even the scent, everything was incredible. Each vegetable was top grade, maybe even better than that. Eddie explained that Alto had harvested all of them from the Demon King's castle. Miguel was even more shocked by this revelation. Just then, Alto entered the barn. Miguel immediately asked him when he had planted the potatoes. Alto answered that it was only a few weeks ago. Miguel was astonished. He demanded to know what kind of method Alto had used, because it was impossible for regular crops to be harvested in just a few weeks. Alto smiled and explained that crops tended to grow faster in the Demon King's castle. Miguel couldn't believe it and held his head in disbelief. Faster? It wasn't just a little faster. They were growing at 4 times the normal rate or more. Suddenly, before he could finish speaking, one of the boxes of vegetables toppled toward Miguel. Fortunately, Alto's quick reflexes allowed him to catch each vegetable and box one by one before they hit the ground. Miguel and Eddie were left speechless, still in awe of Alto's speed. Alto asked Miguel if he was all right, and since he had now seen the crops, they should head back to the estate. With nothing else to say, Miguel praised Alto for being incredible. Back at the castle, Alto happily prepared the table for Miguel and cheerfully mentioned that the dishes were made using crops grown on the Demon King's castle ruins. He urged Miguel to try them. Just by looking at the dishes, they were already a feast for the eyes. Miguel, however, tried not to show too much interest and simply remarked that they looked like ordinary dishes, nothing unusual. As he picked up his utensils, Alto's worry was evident on his face. Miguel started with the soup. He scooped up a spoonful and slowly brought it to his mouth. The moment he tasted it, it was as if his surroundings had completely changed. From that single taste, he could tell the crops had grown strong roots in soft soil and absorbed abundant sunlight, and he could feel all of it through his entire body. He calmly thanked the chef standing behind him for the soup, but the chef quickly replied that he wasn't the one who had cooked it. Miguel's eyes widened in surprise at the answer. Alto immediately spoke up, saying that he and the maid, Familes, were the ones who had prepared the dishes. Familes added that she had simply cooked as she usually did for her mother and younger brothers at home, while the chef explained that he was only watching from behind. This made Miguel recall the moment earlier when he saw Familes and Alto inside the castle while he and Eddie were outside. Maybe that's it, he thought. As Eddie's words from earlier echoed in his mind, Miguel called Alto over and told him that the crops he had grown were delicious. He said Alto was a worthy trade partner and that it was time for him to hear the secret he had mentioned earlier, his actual request. He then carefully explained about a certain fruit, the elf's tomato. It was said to be extremely difficult for humans to cultivate. Some even called it an unmatched delicacy, a miraculous fruit. Miguel told Alto that he wanted him to grow that fruit. Hearing Miguel's words, Alto was completely taken aback, his mind reeling from the request. A wagon was making its way along the edge of a rocky mountain. Inside were Miguel, Alto, and Shia, who had taken on human form. They were heading to the city to buy tomato seeds. Suddenly, the wagon jolted violently, making everyone lose their balance. It came to an abrupt stop. Miguel initially thought it had gotten stuck in the mud, but to their surprise, a massive and terrifying boar stood blocking their path. Miguel quickly called out to Alto, telling him to run away. It was a level 30 iron boar, and it was snarling furiously. Just as the boar lunged at them, Alto calmly extended one hand and, with a single effortless motion, sent the massive creature flying through the air. It landed heavily on the ground with a resounding thud. While Shia, seated in the wagon, only watched with a calm smile, Miguel and the wagon driver were completely stunned by what Alto had just done. He had stopped the iron boar with one hand. Miguel praised Alto's incredible strength, and Alto, smiling, simply said they should continue on their way to the city to buy the elf tomato seeds. When they finally arrived at the city, they were all shocked to discover there were no elf tomato seeds available. Miguel explained that the seeds were supposed to be stored at the guild, so he couldn't understand why none could be found. The lady in front of the counter explained that the seeds had been bought as miracle fruits, but because of cultivation time issues, they had been sent to the capital's research lab. She added, in an unsure tone, that there might still be a few left at some shops around the city. Frustrated, Miguel sat heavily on one of the benches outside the shop. After all the effort they had gone through traveling over the mountain, this was truly disheartening. Shia asked how they were even supposed to find the seeds in such a huge city. Miguel, clearly exhausted, muttered that adult humans really were so fragile. Meanwhile, Alto heard a mysterious voice whisper in his ear once again. He immediately followed it, prompting Shia to ask where he was going. He arrived at a small shop not far from where they had been. A middle-aged man greeted him as he continued to trace the voice he'd heard. The shopkeeper asked what he was looking for, but Alto stopped suddenly, his gaze fixed on a single seed. The voice was coming from it. The shopkeeper noticed his interest and asked if he was interested in the seed. He complimented Alto on his keen eye and explained that the seed was a rare tomato seed once cultivated by elves. However, it took a full 10 years to grow, and no one knew exactly how to cultivate it. Alto was stunned at the idea of tending a crop for 10 years. The shopkeeper went on to say that, miracle fruit or not, who would be willing to grow something that troublesome? Before the old man could even finish suggesting that it was foolish to buy it, Alto firmly insisted that he sell it to him. Alto then quickly returned to Miguel and Shia, happily showing them the seed and announcing that he had found it. Miguel was in disbelief. Alto had been gone for only 5 minutes and had already located the rare seed. Alto added that he had simply found it at a nearby shop and bought it. Once again, Miguel was left completely impressed by Alto. When they returned to the ruins, Alto quickly summoned Euros and Adipsis, who, as usual, were in the middle of her nap. Alto immediately apologized and asked them something about the soil. When Adipsis saw the seed, she instantly recognized it as the elf's tomato seed and sensed a strange power emanating from it. Alto explained that people said it would take 10 years for the seed to mature, and he wondered if there was any way to speed up the process. Adipsis replied that if that was the case, he needed to use monster magic stones as fertilizer. She also pointed out a particular spot in the ruins, telling him it would be the perfect place to grow the seed. As Alto thought about the area she was referring to, Shia cheerfully mentioned that it was the same spot where she had sent those dragons flying, giving Alto a teasing meme face. Adipsis added that it was a dangerously intense location, radiating tremendous magical power, which made it the best place to plant the elf tomato seed. Alto immediately followed Adipsis's advice. Holding the tomato seed in his hand, he stood at the spot where the dragon's blood had soaked deepest into the earth. The soil there could make crops grow at an unnaturally rapid pace, but it was far from easy. The moment seeds were planted, they would sprout, bloom, and wither just as quickly. Growing this miracle fruit was anything but simple. Suddenly the seed began speaking again, repeatedly saying that it was hungry. Alto smiled at it and promised that he would feed it until it was full. He poured his energy into filling the seed with nutrients, tilling the soil, and watering it. But the seed remained hungry, still seeking more sustenance. When Alto went to fetch more water, he realized there was none left. If he returned to the manor for more, they would run out of time. With no other choice, he decided he would have to use the water deep within the soil. When he told Shia, she confirmed that there was indeed an aquifer deep beneath the land, but she questioned how they would tap into it. She shouted at Alto, worried that he might suffer from magic fatigue if he pushed himself too hard. But Alto remained determined, and Shia vowed that they would absolutely not let the seed starve. Together with Euros, Alto would need every ounce of magic they could muster. Euros, with a swirl of a tornado, left it all up to Alto. Deep within the earth lay a vast reservoir of groundwater, at a level that wouldn't deplete the soil's life force. Alto summoned it. Massive whale-shaped water creatures formed from the ground, rising up in a magnificent display. Adipsis was in awe as Alto shaped the groundwater into these majestic creatures and directed them to gather exactly where the seed was planted. Shia observed that the water had been resting in the soil for a long time and was packed with nutrients. As the water creatures delivered every last drop of nourishment to the tomato seed, which still hadn't consumed enough, Shia couldn't help but feel proud of Alto's resolve and power. Meanwhile, Alto stood atop one of the whale-shaped water creatures, with Euros, Adipsis, and Shia looking up at him in amazement. After giving everything he had for the sake of the seed, the tomato seed finally spoke once more, saying that it was full. The elf's tomato seed finally began to sprout, and all of Alto's friends were overjoyed. Shia even gave Alto a hug full of excitement, and as everyone cheered for their hard work, Alto remembered what the shopkeeper had told him about how troublesome and time-consuming it was to grow. Then the seed spoke to him again and thanked him. Alto simply told the seed there was no need to thank him. He was just glad it now had a full belly. Watching Alto's pure heart, Shia smiled softly, recalling the day Alto had saved her just like he had saved the tomato seed. Alto then told everyone that he would take care of it 24/7, together with the slimes. Adipsis was shocked, asking if he was really planning to keep summoning and caring for it non-stop, even in his sleep. Even for a seasoned summoner, she explained, that would be extremely tough. But Alto, smiling, said that was exactly what he intended to do to make sure the tomato grew for sure. Shia immediately agreed, believing wholeheartedly that Alto could do it. Alto then wondered aloud if the water slimes were okay with the plan, but the slimes assured him that as long as he gave them tasty water every day, they were fine. Alto thanked them sincerely. While preparing the soil, Alto asked Shia how tough this was really going to be. Shia, passing by, told him bluntly that even while resting, he would feel completely drained. If she had to put it into words, she said it was like having a huge, delicious king tuna stuck deep in his throat the entire time. That, she explained, was just how bad it was. And so, a week of 24-hour non-stop care with the slimes continued. Sunrise shone upon Glory Castle, and Alto greeted Shia with a cheerful good morning. As they walked, Shia asked if he had gotten used to summoning 24/7. Alto nodded, and when he turned to face her, he told her he had gotten the hang of it. His ears, however, had popped up like a puppy's, which Shia found absolutely adorable. She even asked if there were any other changes to his body, but Alto simply feigned ignorance and said none. Meanwhile, his family also found his new ears irresistibly cute. After a while, Alto's ear returned to normal. While Shia concluded it's the result of 24 hours of non-stop summoning, Jin wondered if he was really okay now. A week later, at the ruins of the Demon Kingdom, the tomato seed's flowers were blooming beautifully. Looking around at the surroundings, Alto commented that animals seemed to be gathering. Shia agreed, saying they must have been drawn to the scent of the elf tomato flowers. Among the visitors, they saw a rainbow coral ptarmigan, an ultra-protected species, and even an angel thunder bunny, animals thought to be extinct. Alto and Shia were overjoyed by the results. Animals he had only ever seen in books were appearing before them, drawn by the scent of the tomato seed. As they examined the flowers one by one, they were surprised to notice that weed monsters were also growing faster than usual. They kept emerging one after another, proof that the elf tomato was growing and accumulating powerful magic. Thinking about it, Alto couldn't wait to see what kind of fruit it would bear. Then suddenly, the weed monsters began to grow out of control. All the animals scattered in panic as the massive branches thrashed wildly. Shia said that if the weed monsters were growing that rapidly, then the elf tomato must be close to ripening. Alto was stunned by what he was seeing. The weed monsters attacked him with their branches, but he moved quickly, dodging the attacks and grabbing a knife from the ground. Declaring that the weeds were picking a fight, he said he wouldn't hold back. Shia shouted that the weed monsters were feeding off the elf tomato's magic to grow, and if it continued, the elf tomato would wither. Alto understood. He didn't have time to deal with all the branches one by one, so he decided to take them down in one strike, just like when he harvested crops. And with the help of Euros' power, Alto rode the storm that Euros threw. With a massive twirl of the raging winds, Alto used his knife to cut down the weed monster in a single blow. In an instant, the weed monster shattered and scattered into the air. As Shia praised Alto for his incredible strength, he turned to look at the tomato seed, only to see that it was already fully grown. Alto couldn't believe he was actually holding a piece of the miracle fruit. With a wide smile, he happily announced to his friends that it had finally ripened. What would normally take 10 years had happened in just 2 weeks. Shia was in disbelief as well, complimenting how shiny and fragrant it was, comparing it to a jewel. Euros even commented that it was the first time she had ever been summoned for something like this, and Adipsis agreed wholeheartedly, as she is as well. With a warm smile, Alto offered to share the tomato with everyone who had helped him. Although it might have seemed unusual at first, Euros and Adipsis found the gesture comforting and pleasant, which filled their hearts with happiness. They all gathered around a table as Alto began slicing the fruit. He immediately felt the incredible thickness and bounce of its flesh. When he finally cut it in half, the cross-section was breathtakingly beautiful, unlike anything he had ever seen before. But upon examining it closely, Alto noticed that the fruit didn't have any seeds, meaning they couldn't grow more. Beside him, Shia was practically bouncing with excitement as Alto distributed pieces of the fruit. Its mouthwatering appearance made it impossible not to want to bite. The fruit was so juicy that it melted the moment it touched the tongue. Alto felt like the happiest kid in the world. The taste was exquisite. A refreshing sweetness followed by a rush of juiciness and the perfect hint of tartness. Shia found it just as delicious, noting its soft texture paired with a firm bite, like the finest cut of meat. Adipsis and Euros also praised the flavor, saying they already felt healthier after eating it. Meanwhile, there was only one piece left for the slimes, though no one noticed at first because they were all so full. Alto commented that eating outdoors was wonderful, but it would also be nice to build a rest hut. He added that there were still some elf tomatoes left and suggested that everyone at the estate should have a chance to try them. Shia happily agreed. Back at Glory Castle's dining room, the table was filled with dishes so mouth-watering it looked like a feast for a festival. Alto proudly presented the meal to his family. Families were stunned, unable to believe she was seeing a dish made with real elf tomatoes. The chef beside her explained that even the high-end restaurants in the royal capital couldn't get their hands on such a fruit. Eddie and Jin eagerly began tasting the dishes. Jin immediately praised the exquisite flavor, and Eddie asked how Alto had managed to grow the tomatoes. As usual, Alto simply gave them a positive smile and said he had worked together with his friends. His family was left speechless, as though he were saying it was something simple to do. Jin then smiled and told him that, either way, they were thankful for him. But Alto didn't want to take all the credit, so he said it was thanks to everyone involved, the ones who planted, harvested, and transported the crops, and the head chef who turned them into dishes. Jin gently told him that people could only live with the help of others. Still, he thanked Alto sincerely. At that moment, Alto felt a warm happiness at being appreciated for something he had grown. Meanwhile, Miguel was so moved by the food's flavor that he looked as though he might cry. Eddie and Jin chuckled at his reaction. As Miguel excused himself, he told Alto that he truly never ceased to amaze him. He carefully explained that because the elf tomatoes were unbelievably delicious, people would be willing to pay any price for them. Even if someone had seeds, no one could grow them, not even get them to sprout. That was the kind of fruit it was. So Miguel firmly asked Alto if he would consider consigning the tomatoes to the Trade Guild's Executive Council. As Alto pondered his words, Miguel added that elf tomatoes were rare fruits. If released to the market, they would become the center of attention, and with attention came danger. People would swarm, beg, and demand them. If Alto entrusted the fruits to the Trade Guild's Executive Council, they couldn't guarantee perfect safety, but the tomatoes could be sold directly at the highest possible value. And of course, Miguel offered to act as the intermediary, only if Alto was willing to sell. Alto thought about building a cabin where everyone could gather and eat together. It was a good idea, especially if they could fund it with the money from selling the elf tomatoes. Miguel watched him quietly, thinking about how Alto truly seemed to be enjoying the entire situation. And so, once again, the carriage set off toward Lily Berea, the home of the Trade Guild. Alto and his group embarked on their journey, carrying the precious elf tomatoes with them. Alto, Shia, and Miguel finally reached the huge city of Lily Boreas. As soon as they arrived at the guild, Miguel proudly presented the miracle fruit. The lady at the counter was stunned, unable to believe what she was seeing. Everyone nearby gathered around in awe, whispering and asking how they had even obtained something so rare, the legendary elf's tomato. Miguel said that one fruit was worth 500,000 gold. Deep inside, he was pleased that it was finally getting the attention it deserved. He then asked the lady at the counter if she could hold on to it until the council meeting, but she immediately refused, saying she couldn't take responsibility for something so important. Resigned, Miguel decided he would just bring it with him instead. Meanwhile, Shia and Alto sat at a nearby table sipping tea, overhearing people asking Miguel where he had found a fruit that took 10 years to grow, and how Miguel maintained the air of secrecy. The lady at the counter then informed Miguel of a troubling rumor. The elf's tomatoes were no longer growing in the elven village, and the elves were reportedly starving. She said the situation was dire, and at this rate, the entire village could collapse. But before she could finish, Miguel interjected, saying he wanted to help, though he found it hard to believe the proud elves had fallen into such a state. Across the room, Alto looked troubled. Shia noticed and asked what was on his mind. He recalled how earlier that morning at the castle, Jin had been running around with surprising energy. She joked that it must have been thanks to the elf's tomatoes they'd eaten the day before. Even after that, Jin had followed them as far as the edge of town to see them off. As they chatted, a mysterious person entered the guild. Miguel, not leaving the counter, could still hear people behind him murmuring about the elf's tomato, calling it a miracle fruit. He thought to himself that if rumors spread well, the fruit's value would only continue to rise. Just as he was about to take a step, an elf suddenly appeared before him. A radiant aura emanated from her, her eyes glowing brightly. Miguel froze in shock, barely managing to ask what an elf like her was doing there. The female elf couldn't speak at first. She only pointed at the fruit Miguel was holding. When she finally saw it up close, her eyes widened, and she suddenly hugged the tomato tightly, bursting into tears. People around them were startled by her behavior as she cried, saying she would never let go of the fruit because it could save the elven village. Miguel was frozen in disbelief at her reaction. Realizing how she was acting, the elf quickly knelt before him, apologizing sincerely. She said she hadn't meant to take someone else's property. At that moment, Alto and Shia turned toward the counter. Shia muttered how unreliable grown-up humans could be and told Alto not to turn out like that. Seconds later, Alto was already standing in front of the elf, surprising everyone with his calm presence. He gently asked her to explain the situation. Shia observed quietly, thinking about how Alto could be surprisingly composed at times, but it was also one of his strengths. They all left the guild and sat together on a bench outside. The elf introduced herself as Duranta and immediately apologized once more for her behavior earlier. Miguel quickly assured her it was all right and introduced himself as a merchant. Alto then asked if she needed the tomato. Duranta nodded and explained that to save the elven village and its people, they desperately needed that fruit and the person who could grow it. For the past few months, no crops had grown in the village. Now, hunger and the fear of death filled their lives. Hearing this, Miguel admitted that the rumors about the elven village were indeed true. Seeing Duranta's despair, Alto felt a strong desire to help. He immediately told her that he understood, and asked how many of the elves' tomatoes they would need. Miguel then introduced Alto to Duranta as the one who had grown the tomato she was holding. Alto smiled warmly, and holding a box of tomatoes in his hands, told Duranta they should head straight to her village. Duranta was in complete shock that a child had managed to grow the legendary elf's tomato. She thanked Alto with all her heart, saying the fruit would save the elven village, and knelt down on the ground in gratitude and joy. Even though Alto knew dangerous things might await them there, his heart was full of determination. He would never let the elves starve. Shia, seeing his courage, couldn't help but feel proud and happy. Meanwhile, Miguel held onto the tomato he had initially planned to entrust to the council. Instead, Shia and Alto set out together for the elven village, carrying Hope and the precious elf's tomatoes with them. Duranta drove the carriage swiftly and handed Alto a magical photo. Confused, he asked what it was. Duranta explained that it was connected to the reason she had been searching in the human town. She was looking for someone capable of cultivating the elven fruit. The photo, she said, would make everything clear. Soon after, they arrived at a vast empty land with nothing but a large ark. Alto asked if that was the elven village. Duranta closed her eyes, channeling energy through her body, and cast a spell that opened the ark, revealing the hidden path into the elven village. She told them it was normally sealed to keep outsiders away. As they walked through the village, Shia noticed a protective barrier surrounding the area. Duranta nodded, confirming that it was meant to keep intruders out. Suddenly, Alto heard something nearby. Duranta reacted quickly and took cover. A group of terrifying skeletons was approaching. Meanwhile, the other elves in the village were already armed and ready to fight. The skeletons kept coming relentlessly. Confused, Alto asked what kind of creatures they were. Duranta explained that the skeletons had started emerging from underground weeks ago and had been attacking their village ever since. Realizing how dire the situation was, Duranta said she would help the others. One of the skeletons disarmed an elf and was about to end its life, but its bones suddenly broke into pieces. That attack came from Shia, who told Alto that if this keeps up, he won't get a chance to speak, so she will help with fighting. From a small and harmless-looking puppy, Shia transformed into a massive beast. Power radiated from her eyes as she unleashed a spell that caused a powerful fall and scatter effect. With a mighty growl, she released energy from her mouth, instantly shattering the skeletons and sending their remains flying into the air. Everyone was stunned by Shia's overwhelming strength. She quickly reverted to her human form and remarked proudly that they had wiped out the enemy using just 30% of her power, and the village remained completely unharmed. Alto stepped forward and proudly told everyone that Shia was his partner. Standing confidently beside him, Shia beamed as Alto added that she always helped him with everything, calling her his loyal sheepdog. Still shocked, the elves stared at Shia. She chuckled and humbly clarified that she was just a regular sheepdog, all thanks to her kind master. One of the elves asked if she was a village beast, a creature capable of taking human form. Duranta answered yes, explaining that only beings of great power could do that. Alto and Shia simply took it as a compliment. Outside a nearby house, Duranta, Alto, and Shia stood together. Duranta explained that inside was someone who once saved the elven village. The elven tomatoes are needed to heal wounded wings after the battle. That same person had been searching for the fruits to help restore the village to its former joy and prosperity. Inside the house, it felt as if they had stepped into outer space. The ceiling was filled with skylights, revealing a breathtaking night sky. Alto was amazed that despite being indoors, it looked so beautiful. Duranta quietly apologized to their guest, explaining that the lady inside slept better that way. Then, a stunning woman with broken wings appeared. Strangely, she seemed to recognize Shia, and Shia also appeared to know her. The woman with the broken wings was Pucelle. Shia was familiar with the place, and when Alto inquired if she knew the woman before them, she nodded. She explained that Pucelle was a fellow magical beast and a fallen angel. They had known each other since before their reincarnation. While Duranta prepared the elf tomatoes, she gently ground them with a pestle and poured the mixture into a diamond-shaped container. She handed it to Pucelle and said she had brewed the elf tomato, the elixir fruit. Pucelle thanked her, gazing at the potion. Its colors shimmered like the whole world was contained inside it. Alto was confused by its appearance, so Pucelle explained that when all the colors in the world are gathered, they turn transparent. As she opened the potion, she added, he could even call it the color of truth. She drank it slowly, feeling its effects as it coursed through her body. Suddenly, pain overtook her, and her body convulsed. I don't know if it's pain or what, but anyway. Before their eyes, her wings began to heal, feathers growing back, bones realigning, until she looked like, well, you know. Duranta, trying to stay composed, awkwardly commented that her torn wings were healing right in front of them, and she expressed her gratitude to Alto. Seeing the transformation unfold, Shia covered Alto's innocent eyes. Deciding to lead Alto outside, who didn't seem to mind, he actually looked like he was enjoying it. But then he heard shouting in the distance. A group of elves had gathered around a young elf tied to a tree. They demanded he apologize, but the kid glared at them and shouted that he wouldn't. This only made the elves angrier. One of them asked if he truly didn't understand what he had done. Curious, Alto approached and asked what was going on. The elves were shocked to see a human inside the elven village and wondered how he even got in. One of them recognized him and assumed he was the one Duranta had mentioned. Alto confirmed it, and the elves immediately thanked him for bringing the elixir fruit. However, there were medicinal herbs and vegetables that had fallen to the ground. The elves explained that the tied-up boy had stolen their food from their storage. It confused Alto. Why would the kid do that? The elves added that he had stolen the food when crops weren't growing, making the theft even more serious. He had taken from their precious stockpile. The young elf suddenly shouted, saying his mother was sick and that the rations weren't enough. It was clear the others didn't understand his situation. One of the elves, enraged, moved to punch the boy, but another stopped him. The calmer one stepped forward and said the boy's family had always been a problem. His father had barely worked a day in his life before running off, leaving his sick wife and son behind. The boy tried to protest, insisting it wasn't true, but the elf was convinced, calling his father a deadbeat who abandoned them. The elf concluded that the boy probably stole the vegetables for himself and didn't care about anyone else. As punishment, he announced that starting that day, the boy's household would have their rations cut in half. Hearing this, the boy burst into tears and begged them not to do it. If they cut the rations, his mother would surely die. But the elves didn't listen. They told him he should be grateful to receive even half, calling him a thief. As the group began to walk away, they turned to Alto and asked if he was seriously siding with the thief. Alto replied, "No, stealing is wrong. It's a crime, and it should be punished. He should reflect on what he's done, but just because someone is wrong doesn't mean the other side is automatically right." His words gave the elves pause. Even the boy seemed to consider what Alto had said deeply. After a moment, the young elf lowered his head and apologized, promising never to do it again. Fortunately, the elves released him. As Alto and the boy walked through the village, Alto was relieved that the matter was resolved. The boy then confessed that he always thought the village people were just cruel. His mother was sick and suffering, and he thought they were heartless for denying them food and medicine, so he assumed it was okay to steal. But because of him, the boy said he realized he needed to calm down. He looked up at Alto with genuine gratitude. He then introduced himself as Rio. Meanwhile, Pucell's wings were fully healed, and she stepped outside. Shia took the opportunity to ask about the attacker, the one who had left her so badly injured. She wanted to know what kind of person it was. Pucell explained that at first, the attacker appeared human, but then it transformed into a dragon and attacked her. Even with her wings torn off, she managed to defeat it. However, not long after that, their village's crops mysteriously stopped growing. Shia looked thoughtful, clearly concerned about the connection. At that moment, Rio brought Alto to the village fields. They looked like dead soil with strange markings that hinted at something unnatural. Rio showed the village's huge field, and the visible building in the distance was the food storage. Alto then noticed that there was no grass growing in the fields. Rio sadly nodded. He then showed Alto an elf tomato seed. He dropped it onto the soil, but the seed only bounced and seemed to melt under the heat. As he sadly watched it, Duranta suddenly arrived. She said it was the same with all crops. They can't even be planted, let alone grow. After they defeated the dragon that attacked the village, it has been like that ever since. Alto suddenly cut in and asked about the skeletons. Duranta said that they were minions summoned by the dragon, and that skeletons spawn infinitely. Alto started to think deeply. At the Demon King's castle ruins, after defeating the dragon there, crops had grown faster through its blood. But in the elven village, it was the complete opposite. He then asked for permission to call a companion real quick. With a flick of his hand, he summoned Adipsis. Adipsis appeared in the middle of something as always, still taking her tea. Alto immediately apologized and asked her if she could examine the soil. Duranta was surprised by Alto, thinking he was a summoner, but Alto told her he was just a shepherd, leaving Duranta completely shocked, wondering how a shepherd could casually summon magical beasts, even a high-level one that could speak in human form. Afterward, Adipsis started to feel the field. She said that the soil of the whole village was no longer usable. The soil was cursed. Duranta dropped to her knees upon hearing this, too shocked to speak. Then Adipsis added that because of the curse, the soil had no magical power. Duranta was completely confused about how it could have happened. She understood that without magical power in the soil, crops wouldn't grow. Knowing that the crops stopped growing in the village after the dragon attacked, something must have placed a curse on the soil, withering crops, starving the people, and causing suffering, all in an effort to destroy the elf village. Alto saw it as absolute cruelty and unforgivable. He asked Adipsis if she could somehow lift the curse and restore the magic. Before Adipsis could even begin, a sudden voice appeared, saying that it was impossible. Large stones suddenly formed into a terrifying and annoying monster. The monster told them that just like he said before, he would destroy the elf village. Duranta suddenly recognized the voice. A few months ago, the same one had attacked the elf village in the form of a dragon. It was the same monster. Duranta was confused, as that monster was supposedly defeated by Lady Pucell, but the monster only laughed, calling himself the Great One. He said it was on purpose. He let himself be beaten to curse the village with his blood. To think they didn't notice it, elves are such a foolish race. Duranta was filled with rage when she heard this. She quickly readied her arrow, her hand trembling with anger. She aimed the arrow and released it straight at the monster. Everyone watched in awe, but the fast and powerful arrow was deflected by the monster. As Duranta stood frozen in shock, the monster casually threw the arrow back at her. Still frozen, Duranta was stunned, but Alto simply stood in front of her and effortlessly deflected the arrow downward using his knife. Both the monster and Duranta were equally shocked by what Alto did. Meanwhile, Adipsis and Shia already knew what Alto was about to do. Alto called the monster a weird dirt, ordering him to lift the curse on the village or he would split him clean in two. The monster only laughed at him, then summoned his skeletons. Rio was terrified as he saw the number of skeletons. The monster firmly told Alto that it was a direct subordinate of the Demon King, but in an instant, Alto cut off its head along with its minions. Just like that, Alto had defeated another powerful creature with only his bare hands and a knife. The ladies beside him were amazed. However, the monster's head, lying on the ground, told him that even if he realized it now, it was still too late. There was no magic left in the soil of the village. Still laughing at them, Shia simply kicked his head and scattered it completely. Afterward, Duranta began to cry, saying that even if they had crop seeds, they wouldn't grow in soil without magic, especially since that land was all they had. Seeing her in despair, Alto, with a gentle smile on his face, asked Duranta if she would like to come to his farm. Duranta was filled with confusion at the mention of Alto having a farm. Alto then explained that it was the ruins of the Demon King's castle. The land was vast, and he couldn't manage it all by himself. Crops there grew rapidly, and he needed a lot of help. He cheerfully said that together they could produce plenty of delicious crops. Duranta couldn't contain her emotions. Moved by Alto's kindness, she burst into tears while thanking him. Alto and his companions smiled warmly at her, and even Rio was overcome with happiness. Suddenly, the moment was interrupted as birds fled rapidly from the trees, and animals began running frantically through the village. From a distance, a threatening presence could be felt. Alto sensed that something was approaching. A voice echoed, stating that the original plan was to destroy the elf village through the curse slowly, but now, it would be destroyed directly. A huge, terrifying dragon suddenly emerged. Alto stood in shock at the sheer size of the dragon before him. Its menacing laughter echoed throughout the village. The dragon declared that he would destroy them himself and that they should consider it an honor. Upon closer look, Duranta realized the truth. It was the real one. The dragon they had defeated before was merely a decoy. With a voice filled with courage, Alto demanded the dragon's name. The beast proudly introduced himself as Doze, the exterminator, as massive blocks of ice formed around. Doze launched a powerful ice attack, but before it could land, a flaming arrow intercepted it. The village guards had arrived, launching fire arrows at the dragon. After the attack, they quickly checked on Duranta, ensuring she was unharmed, while Rio cheered for the guard squad. However, Doze was prepared to strike again. The flaming arrows no longer had any effect. The guards without their arrows immediately took to the ground. Doze arrogantly declared that he was an exterminator, specifically created to annihilate the elves, making their ancient magic useless against him. Duranta was stunned by the revelation. Shia explained that 50 years ago, the Demon King once created living weapons known as exterminators, each designed to wipe out an entire race. Doze was one of them. When asked if she knew about these beings, Shia replied that she didn't just know them, she had fought them herself. Meanwhile, Doze continued laughing as he watched the elves suffer. With cruel delight, he mocked their need for food to survive. Raising his massive claw, he aimed directly at the village's food storage and brought it crashing down. The elves could do nothing but watch helplessly as the dragon demolished their last supply of food. Despair and hopelessness filled the air. With the storehouse gone, survival seemed impossible. Doze taunted them further, savoring his destruction. At that moment, Rio ran toward the dragon's foot, desperately trying to push it away. He cried out that his mother needed the herbs and food in the storehouse, and without them, she would die. The elves could only watch in sorrow as the boy struggled. Doze laughed at the child's efforts, offering him 5 seconds to move before he would be crushed. But Rio stood firm, refusing to back down. His courage moved the adult elves, who rushed in to protect both him and the remaining food supplies. These are the same adult elves that Rio once robbed. The adults apologized for their earlier actions and stated that it was their duty to protect the children. They admitted they had been wrong to think only of themselves. Now, they would stand to protect him. As they prepared their magic, Doze coldly reminded them that their spells were useless. The dragon raised its massive arm to deliver a fatal blow. Rio froze in fear, unable to move as the enormous arm descended. The moment the dragon's arm smashed the ground, it suddenly felt something. Its hand slowly moves upward meters from the ground. The reason behind it was Alto, who used his single arm to stop the dragon's assault on Rio. Chapters end at 12. Thank you for watching, guys. I hope you love this manga. Have a good day.